attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and how our attentions are affected by the digital world we build and also live on a lot of the time. So two very, very hot topics, very contentious. But my name is Emmy Cao. I am a developer advocate at Wix. Psychology and cognitive science are what I studied in school and my biggest passions, but I'm not a medical professional, so if you do feel like you need help, nothing is medical advice, and please go see a professional. There's my disclaimer, but something about me is that I really liked video games as a kid, obsessively. So my career options there were game dev or pro gamer, and I tried both. So on the left is when I taught a game dev camp for girls, and on the right is when I had a very brief stint as an Overwatch coach for our college's esports team. Thank you. It's not something I'm proud of, but game dev didn't work out because I know what the industry is like, and pro gaming also didn't work out for obvious reasons. So now I'm in web. But when I was 9 until I went to college, I just had this terrible, terrible addiction to gaming, uncontrollable. And I can't remember a lot of my childhood, and I'm not proud of it. My vice of choice was Team Fortress 2. Anybody know? So I was one of those kids, you go click on their profiles, and you see that they have like 5,000 hours in the game, and you're like, I could beat this kid up in real life. Hey, you probably can, but my problem caused physical and mental problems that I'm still dealing with today. And like a lot of concerned moms, for a really long time, I thought gaming caused my ADHD symptoms. But it turns out, after a lot of therapy, it turns out ADHD caused a lot of my gaming problems. So I was home alone a lot as a kid, and it all makes sense to me now. But my child ADHD impulsive brain was just extremely, extremely bored. So I found myself the most instant gratification I could get. We didn't have drugs just like lying on the floor at home, so we had a computer though that was connected to the internet, and that's like the next best thing, to be honest. And we all know now that one of the biggest risk factors for internet gaming addiction, physical addictions, and any kind of behavioral addiction is ADHD. You just crave dopamine, and your brain is more sensitive to like stuff that feels good, but in a bad way. And it's worse also if you're a kid with a developing brain. So there's a lot of misconceptions that led me to being undiagnosed for a really, really long time. One is that people think that if you're a smart kid, you're just not struggling. But it's a neurodevelopmental disorder, so nothing gives it to you, you just are born with it, and you have structural differences in your brain, much like things like autism or dyslexia. And you're also not always hyperactive. So we have this image of like a little boy jumping around, but you can also be primarily inattentive, which a lot of women have, and that goes undiagnosed a lot because the problems are so internal. You're not being disruptive, so no one is getting you help. And you can also be combined or shift types throughout your life. And also, it's not necessarily that you have a deficit of attention, which is a misnomer, to be honest. You just can't control your attention, which is why after my friends were all tired of gaming, I could keep going. And then I could forget to eat. I just lost complete track of time. And it's also largely characterized by a dopamine deficiency. So your brain craves more stimulation. And it's going to fill those gaps in any way it can, whether it's through just giving you racing thoughts, or like you start fidgeting or stimming. And this dopamine-seeking behavior makes it hard to do boring stuff. When you're neurotypical, you have an importance-based system where your attention is driven by what's important, the stuff that's logical and reasonable to do, whereas people with ADHD have an interest-based nervous system. So you're driven by things like interest, challenge, novelty, and urgency. This is called the ICNU framework. The problem is that the world doesn't reward this kind of behavior, but things like video games and internet actively try to check all of these boxes and do them as best as they can. And let's say you do become interested in something and you want to keep doing it. The ADHD brain also struggles with executive dysfunction, and executive function is all the skills you need to do stuff, the planning and organizing to seeing a task to completion, and everything in between. So things like planning, working memory, organization, impulse control, task switching and emotional regulation. So this can make you easily distracted, tunnel vision on one thing, or have trouble starting a task just because you see all the steps at once and you don't know where to begin and where to end. But one of the hardest parts about ADHD is not just the symptoms, it's the loneliness and, feeling like no one really understands you. It's hard to explain when you have trouble doing stuff. And people think that you can just try harder. Sorry, that's the emotional dysregulation getting to me. But when you try to explain the magnitude to which these symptoms affect you, it seems a lot more problematic. It's not just the big things like doing your work, it's the small things like you forget to pick up some trash, you zone out while someone's talking, you forget to text your friend happy birthday, and they all just add up. And it's not an excuse, but it is a real medical condition that we need to pay attention to. So we can all try to understand people a little bit better, but nowadays, I think it's a lot easier for us to relate. The ADHD brain seeks dopamine. Similarly, the internet can also make you seek more and more dopamine. And let's talk about dopamine. So we commonly know of dopamine and motivation. Let's talk about motivation first. So motivation is something you think is just like willpower, like you want to do something and you can do it. And dopamine we think of as reward center. It makes you feel good, but it doesn't make you feel good. It's not the thing that directly causes that, but when something does feel good, it's the thing that makes you seek out that behavior more and more often, because it anticipates you feeling good. And that makes you focus on stuff. And when you think about it, that's what attention is. It's also self-reinforcing, so the more you do it, the more motivated you become to keep doing it, and for it to feel as good as the first time, you're gonna need more stimulation to make that better. If that sounds like drug tolerance and addiction, it's because it's the same exact mechanisms. And that's why people are doing crazy stuff now on TikTok and stuff. I'm sure The Godfather was once a great movie, but it's a little long. Maybe you need some Subway Surfer to like scratch that itch in your brain so you can actually tolerate it. But everybody is overstimulated these days, especially if you work on a computer. And there is a noticeable decline in our attention span if you're online a lot. There's a lot of studies on this. If you watch movies now, there's so many cuts. They're just getting shorter and shorter and shorter. Dr. Gloria Mark was one of the scientists who studied human attention, and she's been doing it for a long time. So since 2004, she's been doing this study where she tracks how long it takes for someone to switch from one task to another, attention shifting. So if you were working on a Word doc and then you switched to your email, how long that took. In 2004, it was about 2.5 minutes, and most recently, it's been around 45 seconds. So about a third of what it used to be, and there are consequences for this. It resets your mental schema. So imagine you're coding, you have all these notes on what you're doing in your head. It's like a whiteboard full of stuff. You go away from that, do another task, and you gotta erase most of it, if not all of it. And to go back, you have to reconstruct it. So it's very, very cognitively taxing. And that makes it take longer for you to be back in flow, that like really feel good state where I know what I'm doing and I feel like I'm actually good at programming right now, and you feel productive and you feel good. Multitasking can also backfire a lot. So while we think that it's something that's really good because we're rewarded for it and because our machines can handle a million tabs and apps opening at the same time, a lot of people have, like multiple monitors. But I think beyond like 2 monitors, to be honest, you're like, it's not your workstation anymore. It's like the NASA command center. You don't need that much. You like manufacture this want for that much. People could code before. And studies are pretty consistent in finding that multitasking not only makes you slower at completing the task, it also makes it so that you're more prone to errors. And this also causes higher actual and perceived stress. So the physical indicators of stress, like your blood pressure And also, you think that you are doing more work than you're actually getting done, which gives the illusion of multitasking, making you more productive. So how do we stop this digital attention shifting that's mindlessly going on? Dr. Marks says, first, you have to be aware of your behavior, this mindfulness, metacognition. And that's actually really hard for a lot of people because so much of your behavior is automatic. Does anyone do this where you're on your email and then you open a new tab and you open your email again? And you're like, oh, still nothing there, but I don't know why I did that. Sometimes you don't know what you're doing until it happens. But you get better at it. You get better at noticing. And you need to have motivated desire to stop the behavior. People think that's where it ends, that you just have to want it bad enough. But there's actually another step, and it's that you have to have the cognitive resources to resist the urges. We don't always have enough resources to resist the urges, like, say you've been paying attention in a dark room for a really long day on really hard stuff, and you just want to use your phone so bad and pay attention so bad, but you can't. And that's okay. The point is, a lot of things depend on your brain, just this squishy little mass that depends on sugars. We don't always have cognitive resources. You could be tired or anxious or overwhelmed. Maybe it's been a long day, or you might have ADHD. The brain didn't anticipate the discovery of the internet. It didn't anticipate JavaScript. Dopamine was supposed to make you do good stuff, like look for food or human connection, and now, like, what is a TikTok? But the point is, you can't help that your brain reacts in this way sometimes, just like how ADHDers can't help the way that they were born with a certain brain. So I like this quote. It's by Oliver Burkeman, and he says, "Attention just is life. Your experience of being alive consists of nothing other than the sum of everything to which you pay attention." So a very long and eloquent way of saying basically what you pay attention to becomes your reality. It becomes your life. And it sucks when you can't control your attention because you can't control what your life looks like. And some people are on the more extreme end of this, where your attention just feels so fragmented, not just online, but in every part of your life. But regardless of why you struggle with attention, everyone just wants to feel control of your attention and therefore of your life. And more often than not recently, we're having our attentions taken from us forcefully. Now, we talked about how dopamine is motivation. Motivation is behavior, behavior is action, and action makes you do stuff. It makes you want to do stuff and crave things and spend time on resources and spend time on services. That's why people pay so much money for it. It's because they know what it's worth, and it's worth a lot. So now we know the value of attention, and that certain things like the internet or being neurodivergent can influence your control of your attention. So how can we use this knowledge to be more supportive of others? Simply put, ADHD-friendly design is just one that respects the human attention. And we all need this. It's not just beneficial for people with ADHD. I can't give you like a checklist for things to do because it just occurs on a spectrum of symptoms and a variety of intensity of those symptoms. So you don't have to specialize to build for ADHD, but certain things hurt people with ADHD more so in a way that feels exploitative, like infinite scrolling patterns or relying on you to have impulse control, but you might not have a good grasp of that. So avoid deceptive patterns and don't be evil. And if you're not sure how to not be evil, that's a bigger problem, but the Humane Design Guide from the Center for Humane Technology is a really good resource on specific things that are inhibitive or supportive of our attention. So follow humane design guidelines, general good accessibility and user experience, like kind of what Elena was talking about earlier. If a form feels long to someone, it might feel longer for someone with ADHD. A frustrating experience will feel even more frustrating, so it's a delicate balance. But if you do want to keep users with ADHD in mind, there are some things you can ask. One is the user in control. So is it easy for them to willfully engage and disengage in a behavior? And two, can certain ADHD traits be a disadvantage for them? Can they hurt them? So if you know people struggle with impulse control, don't enforce infinite scroll. If you know people have issues with working memory, don't punish them for forgetting important information you gave on the previous page. And lastly, do we deserve their attention? If you're grabbing their attention, make sure it benefits them and not you first and foremost. An example is Duolingo. If I download this app, I want to learn a language. That's the most important thing to me. So by all means, use that like ICNU criteria, use urgency and challenge, and be really aggressive about it, be annoying. I don't care as long as I learn the language, and that's my goal. However, if you sign up for like a streaming subscription and they're like really, really loud and fun about stuff like, hey, did you see our new show? Hey, like we have this promotion going on, but also we're like renewing your subscriptions, and yeah, I'm not gonna tell you that. Then there might be a conflict of interest. Another, I think, big example is like the cookie pop-ups have been getting more and more frequent recently, and no one wants to read that. People know that people don't read that, so you shouldn't punish people for not reading that, because we also know that privacy and having control of your data is a value that a lot of people have. So the goal is to have priority over value over revenue. We shouldn't stop building stuff. There's a lot of value in technology, but you just have to realize what's happening is there's like a cycle of people wanting more and people wanting things to be faster. And you start to demand developers to build faster and make performance better, which makes people want even more. So you get more overworked, and then people want more. It's like the snake eating its tail. But it's no wonder that we're all burned out. We're just creating our own problems. And we should provide value over all else. They say that money isn't the root of all evil. The love of money and greed is. And that's why big tech is mostly from America, because we love money, and I'm sorry on our behalf. But something we can all do is build empathy. I think Jeff's talk earlier was super relevant. It's okay to make stuff better because you want to get paid. You want to make a living. I don't expect you to solve the world's problems, but like Jeff said, we can all just do our best. And something we can all do better is having empathy. And this will help you build better judgment and learn how to support others. And another thing we can do easily is support neurodiversity in the workplace that we have and in the dev community. People with ADHD can be extremely creative. They're proven to have better divergent thinking, and they're 300% more likely to be entrepreneurs. And they can and will notice if your product isn't friendly for them. So like Elena was saying, sometimes you don't know what isn't accessible until someone points it out and you ask someone. So another reason is that I have a hunch that there might be more developers specifically with ADHD than the 5% of the global population that has it. And there's a lot of reasons for this. I think it's something that's rewards ADHD tendencies, so things like instant gratification or like seeing cool colors and doing something and seeing a result. It's like the little kid pressing buttons because he wants to know what they do, right? But there's also a subreddit for ADHD programmers that no other career has, to my knowledge, and it's also in the top 5% of Reddit. But they're scared. It's not about how awesome and how much they love programming. They're having a really hard time. They're anxious and terrified, and it's really hard for them. But they want to do well because they're obviously looking for help, right? The point is that a lot of people don't even disclose their disorders of any kind. It's a liability for you in this economy where people are getting laid off all the time. And it's not something that's easy to discuss. So we need to create a space that's psychologically safe for everybody to talk about mental health. And we can all be kinder to people for free. People with ADHD are used to being called like lazy or unmotivated, or I know you could do better, or you're not doing this well enough. So people are gonna mess up. Everyone's gonna mess up, but if people mess up, forgive them without judgment. So this means like, not you didn't do this because you're lazy, but you didn't do this maybe because you're having problems. How can I help? So people aren't inherently addicts. They're struggling with addiction is another example. And criticism won't make things easier for sure, but some kind words and praise might help stop someone from giving up. And lastly, considerations for people with ADHD also help everybody. They help people in a hurry. They help people who are anxious, depressed, or overwhelmed. Brain fog from COVID you could just suddenly get, and then you have all these ADHD symptoms that you weren't ever anticipating to deal with. Or it can also help people who are online a lot and experiencing the effects of being online a lot firsthand. But you can't just digital detox. That's your job. If you're doing a detox, you're not doing your job. And sometimes your hobby is also online, and sometimes your job is your hobby. And sometimes your friends also need that digital connection. We can't avoid the internet anymore, but we can take these measures to help. It also helps children. We know the story of like, if you give a kid a marshmallow and say, wait 15 minutes and I'll give you 2 marshmallows. A lot of them just eat the marshmallow because they don't understand delayed gratification and impulse control, and a lot of it is the same way. So learning about ADHD can also help you support the people around you and build empathy. And you'd be surprised by how many people might benefit from that. That's all I have for today. Last note is that if you are neurodivergent or struggle with mental health, just know that your struggles are valid and you deserve self-compassion. That's all. Thank you.